All right, this is Piss and Vinegar day two. This is the end of my training week, or second last day of my training week, doing arm wrestling training. Um, Essentially, this is just forearm day for anyone else, but for me, it's twofold. I'm trying to get big forearms whilst also trying to get better at the sport of arm wrestling, which I'm a huge fan of. Unfortunately, I'm blessed or not blessed with big hands. I have terrible little man hands, so probably never be competitive in the sport, but I enjoy it nonetheless. So, and as you can see here, I'm doing side pressure training. I just did my warm up, and this is one of the only times I do actual volume in my training. I do 3 sets of five or 5 by 5 sometimes for my side pressure because I'm still a novice with side pressure. Well, I wouldn't say I'm a novice. I'm side pressure 35 kilos here today. My max would probably be like 45. So it's actually pretty strong side pressure. But I still have plenty of linear progression to be made on my side pressure. So I train with volume in order to get that kind of central nervous system efficiency. So yeah, just 3 sets of 5 here. It's fucking painful doing side pressure. You can see me jumping afterwards. It's brutal on the elbows. And now I'm jumping into my behind the back wrist curls. And with these, you can see I put them against the rack. That way it stays consistent. And I'm going from that one hole below, as you can see, it goes down to that first hole, and then the bar goes up to or above the second hole. And that way I know my reps are always consistent. I don't warm up with these. I don't see the point of warming up for such a small muscle. You're not going to tear unless you're like a Levan Seganis Philly kind of guy. You're not going to tear your wrist tendons. And I use fat grips because it puts more tension into the fingers, not just the actual forearms themselves. You get more wrist and finger stimulation, which is super important for arm wrestling. So even though this is only 60 kilos, I mean, without that fat grip, I'd be doing probably 70 or 80. Like the fat grip makes it significantly harder, especially when you have small hands like I do. So yeah, if you want to strengthen up your hands and your wrists, as well as making your forearms big, I would suggest putting fat grips onto your forearm movements in order to get those big, meaty man hands that I never used to have. I always had pussy hands. It wasn't until I started doing arm wrestling that I grew my hands to a respectable man level. And then I do a forced, or I do a rest pause, and then I go. So I rested about 20 seconds. Then I did non-strict ones, and then I do a drop set, and that's it. It's just one set to failure with a drop set, as per pretty much all of my exercise routines. So yeah, this is now 40 kilos. Just dropped it, getting a bit more stimulus. Forearms are pretty fucking cooked by now. Having to cheat some reps up, force reps, and then I move on to unilateral work to kind of get better at moving, well, wrist curling with one arm at a time, because in arm wrestling you're only using the one arm. So this one I like because you can plant your wrist or your forearm on the bench, and that way you can't really cheat with side pressure or anything. I mean, you use a little bit of shoulder, you lose a little bit of side pressure, but it's mostly wrist. So I like this one. I made kind of a wooden handle, a multi-spinner of sorts, the Devon Rat handle, out of wood, and some a seatbelt. It works really good for training your cup. Then I do a rest pause here. It's not long enough. I should have rested longer, but as per usual, I often don't rest long enough between my rest pauses. You know, a lot of people say, oh, rest pause 15, 20 seconds. But when you're training true failure, you oftentimes need more like 30 seconds of a rest pause. So now I just kind of do force reps just to get a little bit extra stimulus. And then I switched to left hand, but I recorded it terribly, so I didn't upload that part. Now I'm doing pronation curls. So this looks like a bicep movement, but you actually barely feel this in the tricep if you do it right. Like this is almost entirely going into my pronator muscles. And you have two pronator muscles, one at your wrist, one at your elbow. And I like this one the most because I train my right forearm every day with a kind of nucleus overload. And just every single day I do pronation and rising. If you guys, anyone that is watching knows what arm wrestling is, you'll know what that means. But if you don't, this is pronation, and this is a very underrated bodybuilding movement too, because a lot of bodybuilders just train their extensors and flexors, but they don't train their pronator muscle, and they don't get this kind of Devon Larratt looking muscle. And I'll actually show you now what I mean by that. Is this muscle here, you don't develop that, and all of a sudden you get this extra kind of beefiness to the forearms that you'd otherwise not get if you didn't do this pronation of the wrist. So even if you're not into arm wrestling, these forearm days that arm wrestlers do are actually the best ways of building huge forearms. I mean, all fucking bodybuilders have huge forearms. Sorry, every arm wrestler has huge forearms. Then I added in a new movement today. I was doing some rising. So this is just ulnar deviation for scientific exercise science terminology. But in arm wrestling, it's called riser. And this gets your wrists really thick, trains your brachioradialis. And it's super important for arm wrestling. But it's also really good for building up big, strong, healthy wrists. Because a lot of times we just do flexion and pretty much just flexion. But we don't pronate. We don't extend. We don't ulnar deviate. So all these different kind of different movement planes that arm wrestlers do kind of concrete your wrists, give you these strong, healthy wrists. I used to have terrible wrists. I couldn't bench press without straps. I couldn't overhead press without straps. Any pressing movement over 100 kilos, my wrist would hurt too much. Nowadays, no problem. And this one, I'm taking it hell slow because it's such a delicate kind of area with the ulnar and the radius. So you got to be careful. So it's a slow, controlled tempo when I'm doing these. And same as ever, just one step to failure. And then I'm doing a little bit of vanity posing. Not the best lighting, kind of fucked it up, but it's okay. Forearms are growing even during a cut. And that's the pronator muscle right there. It's even starting to pop out on me. It looks like a little bit of a tumor in your forearm. Super important. It really develops the forearm holistically rather than just those two extensors and flexor muscles. And then I finish it up with a dead hang. So these are really good for your lower back. They're good for shoulder mobility and shoulder health. And yeah, I just finish up dead hang to failure. I add 10 kilos because I don't want to be hanging for like, a minute or two. Although with these fat grips with my small hands, I can barely get over a minute on these. But adding the weight allows me to just get 30, 40 seconds. And then I can also just do a drop set. And this is just kind of to finish off the flexors. And then I finish off with some extensor work after this. Man, I pull some fucked up looking faces. I only just realized yesterday when I started recording these videos how fucking whack I look when I work out. It's kind of funny. It's kind of cursed. What the fuck? And then I drop the 10, do a drop set, keep going. And the pump you get from this is fucking insane. You could just get away with a set of dead hangs to failure and a set of extensors to failure, and you could build probably 80% of your forearm mass from that. Everything else is just kind of overkill or sport specific in my case for arm wrestling. And then I finish off with some forearm reverse extension curls or whatever you want to call them. I just call them forearm extensions. And I used to have to be very, very weak at these. I could barely do like 15 kilos. Now I'm doing, 20, 30 kilos. This is a second set because I forgot to record the first one. So I had to drop the weight. But ordinarily I would do 30 kilos, and that's pretty strong. And it shows in my forearm extensor development. I used to have horrifically small extensors. I was all flexors, and that really kind of limits your forearm size. Same with not training the pronator too, but especially the flexors. So if you're not already doing extensors, if you're not already doing extensors, I'd highly suggest starting to train just one set to failure of these. I do a drop set too, just to get a bit more stimulus. And then I'm done. I mean, this workout took me probably about 20, 25 minutes. This is my probably longest workout because there's a bit of volume in it, whereas all my other workouts take about 20 minutes. And so that's it. That's the workout done. Catch everyone tomorrow. Peace.